So this week we have a fascinating idea to discuss. The Torah portion is the portion of Tazria, but it turns out that this week we are actually going to be celebrating a triple celebration. This is going to be one of the few Shabbatot, one of the few occasions in the year when we take out 3 Torah scrolls. In the first one, we're going to follow the regular cycle, the reading of the Torah portion, Tazria. In the second one, we are going to read about the theme of Rosh Chodesh, because this month, Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat. And then in the third Torah scroll, we are going to read a reading that is about the story of the Exodus from Egypt, and it is called HaChodesh, and has in it some of the ideas that we are going to reflect upon on Passover. So we have these 3 readings, the portion of the week, Rosh Chodesh and HaChodesh. Now what's interesting, in this third Torah scroll that we take out, it talks about one of the very interesting instructions that were given in the midst of the drama of the Exodus from Egypt. We know the Exodus was a culmination of plagues that were inflicted upon the Egyptians and eventually resulted in the freedom of the Jewish people. Pharaoh saying, please leave, go, just leave as quick as you can. But in the midst of all this, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people were given a special instruction about the way we are supposed to calculate the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is a little bit more complex than other calendars because it follows the lunar and the solar cycle. Most calendars either follow the solar cycle, that's the general Gregorian calendar, or there is the other way of following the lunar cycle, which is what you have in the Muslim faith, where they follow the lunar cycle, and it's simple. When you follow both, you end up having a bit of a problem. Why? Because the lunar cycle is 12 times 29 and a half days, which is 354 days. So the lunar year is 354 days. But the solar year is 365 days. There's an 11-day discrepancy between the solar and the lunar year. So you need to have some mechanism to reconcile and to keep them in check. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to follow both, which is the whole idea of a leap year. In fact, this year is a leap year. So this year it's especially relevant because we have a leap year, which is an extra month. We have 13 months in the Jewish calendar this year, and the purpose of that extra month is to help reconcile the discrepancy between the lunar and solar cycle. So the 30 extra days help us catch up some of the days we fell behind and actually help us get a little bit ahead to pre-compensate for what we're going to fall behind next year. So the whole idea of the solar and lunar calendar being combined requires a leap year. And that's one of the interesting components of how the Jewish calendar is calculated, and one of the considerations that need to be factored in when the Jewish calendar is being formulated and planned. The question is, why is all of this being told to the Jewish people in the midst of the drama of the Exodus from Egypt? Wouldn't it make more sense? Wouldn't it be much more reasonable to wait until the Jewish people have left Egypt, settled in the land of Israel, have their own nationality, have their own civilization, develop their own systems of government, and with all that, they can develop their own systems of calendar calculations as well? Why in the midst of the confusion and drama of the Exodus are they given this mitzvah and this instruction of how to calculate the Jewish calendar? So with a little bit of insight into the deeper significance of the Jewish calendar, we will get the answer to this question. Because there's another beautiful Kabbalistic idea that revolves around the cycle of the sun and the cycle of the moon. The sun and the moon are both heavenly bodies circle in the sky, but they are very different if you compare them to each other. The sun is consistent and the same every single day, day in, day out. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west, in its full glory each and every day. The moon, on the other hand, waxes and wanes. At the beginning of the Hebrew month, it's tiny, actually it's invisible. And then as it gradually gets to the middle of the month, it becomes a full moon, only to start to diminish and to decline as the second half of the month continues until it completely disappears. So the waxing and waning of the moon is a very different kind of cycle than the rising and setting of the sun, which is so consistent and so reliable each and every day. In Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, it tells us that these two cycles of the consistency of the sun and the fluctuation of the moon reflect a deeper universal energy that is actually very much part of the human experience as well. In human experience, we have ideas, rational thinking, logical understandings. We have mathematical equations. 2 plus 2 on a simple level, a simple example, 2 plus 2 is 4. Those ideas, those beliefs are unchangeable. If 2 and 2 was 4 yesterday, it's going to be 4 tomorrow, and it's going to be 4 in 2 weeks from now as well. It's not going to change. However, there is another emotional aspect of the human experience, which is very real and very precious, I must add, which is the emotional experience which fluctuates. Some days you're in the mood, some days you're not. Some days you're feeling more robust and upbeat, and some days you're feeling more the gravity and the weight of your burdens and concerns. The emotional component fluctuates, but is also in many ways much more real. And this is actually something that plays out in the way we practice our Judaism as well. In Judaism, we have Jewish values, Jewish beliefs, foundational ideas that don't change. They actually sustain us and keep us strong, on a strong footing from generation to generation throughout the millennia. And that is the cycle of the sun that is consistent, predictable, and unchanging. But with that approach alone, you can end up with a Judaism that is very dry, very rote, very repetitive, rather than a Judaism that is filled with emotion, passion, feeling, excitement, joy, happiness, which is the emotional aspect that the moon represents. So what we're being told over here is that Judaism values the emotional, which has a certain truth to it, a certain reality to it, that when you're joyous and passionate about something, you're engaged in a very convincing, powerful way. And then there's also a certain value and truth to knowing that not everything can be contingent upon how we're feeling and what the emotional level is at that moment. Sometimes we've got to acknowledge and accept that there's a certain truth, a certain ideal, and that remains the gold standard that we keep striving for, even if we are not reaching it at this point in time. So it's really a combination of the two that brings out the best result. It's the consistency of Judaism, reflected of the sun, and the emotional engagement, reflective of the moon, that gives the best result. It's the hybrid model that gives the most complete, comprehensive, balanced way of engaging in our Judaism. And this is why we have the leap year, so that we don't get ahead in one of these areas and fall behind in the other. If we just rely too heavily on the discipline, on the practice, on what must be done, and forget about the feelings that are supposed to accompany that practice, then we are going to sell ourselves short. On the other hand, if we just follow the emotional drive and engage when we feel like it and disengage when we don't, we are also going to fall short and let ourselves down and not meet and reach our full potential. So the leap year has a deep Kabbalistic spiritual message, a deep Kabbalistic spiritual meaning, which is we got to reconcile between the intellect and the emotions. The mind and the heart need to be in sync. And the synergy that is born out of that is where the beauty of Jewish practice is born out. This can now explain why in the midst of the Exodus from Egypt, they were given this instruction about the Jewish calendar. Because it was at this moment that their Judaism was really being born, and their understanding of what it means to live as a Jew was really being taught to them. Even before they settle in the land, as they're going through the fluctuations of the Exodus and the challenges of the journey in the desert, there needs to be some consistency. There needs to be some concrete values that they uphold and stay loyal to. And when things are consistent, we need to remind ourselves of the emotional element that needs to add flavor and meaning and joy and excitement into that as well. So this was actually the perfect time for them to incorporate these ideas into their behavior and into their mind and heart, bringing about the ultimate result, the perfect result, the balance between intellect and emotion, the balance between understanding and feeling. Both are required for a Jew to have a wholesome relationship with their soul, with Torah, and with the creator of the world. So the taking out of the 3 Torah scrolls is really a reminder of the 3 components. There is the emotional, the intellectual, and then the synergy that is born out of the 2 of them. So as we prepare for Passover, this is yet another lesson, another teaching, another reminder of how liberation, how freedom is truly achieved. An internal kind of freedom that is a balance of discipline and emotion, of logic and reason together with passion and feeling. That's how we set our souls free. That's how we tap into the depths of our soul's potential and live by its joy and light each and every day. L'chaim.